Hello and welcome back to my channel. Okay, this is going to be quite a long video. I want this to be a discussion video, and this is kind of a sister video to a video that Bookborn Hillary recently did when I was doing my research for my Zach Argyle interview. For those of you who don't know, Hillary's married to Zach, and I watched a great video that she did was talking about our science fiction and fantasy readers dumbing down their work. And this is kind of looking at it from a reader's perspective, but also from a writer's perspective. So if you've just read the title and now you're jumping ahead to the comments, please don't. Actually listen to what I'm talking about and explore the idea. And I do want to hear your thoughts and ideas about this. So the first thing I want to touch on is attention spans. Are attention spans becoming shorter? Is that why readers are potentially struggling with science fiction and fantasy books and all books in general? I think how we consume media with the advent of the internet has definitely changed that. I think some long form discussions do take place. You get video podcasts that are then created into audio podcasts that go on for hours. Those are interesting places for long form discussion, but I feel like in some ways some people are not looking at books in the same way because it requires more effort, and I think some people want to have more things just spoon fed to them and that they just don't take as much of an interest in it. They don't kind of explore the critical thinking part of reading, which is something that Hillary touched on in her video. I think some people just want to read a book, have a good time and put it aside. Now there's nothing wrong with that, and I'll come back to this in a bit. But I think sometimes going into a book and not expecting to be challenged and finding it difficult puts some people off reading, or they don't like it, which I think is quite a bad thing really. A lot of people also read books or consume them whilst they're doing other things. Audiobooks have become incredibly popular. And these days we're always doing more than one thing. People, walk the dog, go for a run, exercise well, whilst listening to an audio book. I know a lot of comic book artists and others who have audio books in the background all the time and are listening to them, for 10, 12 hours a day. And it's something to keep their mind active whilst they're drawing. And that's fantastic. But I think sometimes not focusing on a book where it does have more to say can mean a lot of readers aren't getting it, which I'll dig into a bit more. The next thing I want to talk about is the gamification. There's pros and cons. So the pros is readers are more engaged with the community, they talk to other people about their books, they have targets for reading, and more books are being read. Now as an author, great, fantastic. However, I think there are a lot of negatives to the gamification. This is where you sort of say, this year I'm going to read 50 books, this year I'm going to read 100 books, because it prioritizes consuming the books as fast as possible to reach that goal, to reach that target, to feel like you've achieved something, rather than focusing on what the content of the book is. I think it prioritizes speed over quantity over quality. You don't actually dig into the book, you don't think about it. I think that creates less time for reflection, for thought, for pondering about the book. What does it actually mean? Is there a deeper message? What were the themes being explored within this book? And I think that's quite a negative point of the gamification of reading. If you're essentially skim reading a book, you're never looking beneath the surface, you're not trying to comprehend it. If the information is available somewhere else, why should I push myself? Why should I just go online and find someone else that tells me what the book is about, and therefore I don't need to do any of that critical thinking. I don't need to try. I just kind of read the book, enjoy the story and move on, and that's it. And I don't think that's really great in terms of writers or readers. I think social media has had a big impact on reading. There are pros and cons there again, so let's explore some of them. Before, it was really difficult to find someone who's reading the same kind of books. There again, it takes some of the critical work and critical thinking away from the individual. They can just go onto a Reddit or a forum or a Discord or somewhere and ask other people, or just read what they're saying about the book. And then there again, it's just a case of, I don't need to do the work. Someone has told me what the book is about. But of course, that's just their opinion, that's just their perspective, and that's just one view about what the book is. I think book clubs are great, and I'm doing read-alongs myself. I'm not going to read the book and then tell you what it is about. I think when you have a larger group of people, it's really interesting because someone will say, I think it was about this, that and the other, and someone else say, I never saw that, or now that you've mentioned it and I've thought about it a bit, yeah, I can see that thing, or I disagree, I think it's exploring this, and you challenge the other person's theory. I think that great kind of back and forth is really good. But if you read a book and then just go online and see what someone says and go, it's about that, okay, and then you move on, I think there's a real danger with that, with being a reader. Always having that crutch there means you just never try and work it out by yourself. You may get there, but if you don't even try, then you're not actually challenging your own thinking about the book. You're just going along with the flow. Waiting for the bin man to go past. Hang on. The next thing is to do with popular people. BookTube, BookTokers, some of them have huge followings, and for many people they become a trusted source, someone who's reading the same kind of content, and therefore their opinion should be valued because they're popular. However, popular doesn't mean they're right, and also it doesn't mean that they're going to have the same thoughts, feelings, ideas as you. But there again, if they've got a huge following and you speak out against them, it's very possible you could get shouted down. So therefore, do you just feel pressured to go along with it and never question what that person's saying? I think booktubers and others, those who have enormous followings, have quite a lot of power. And I think it's true that it does come with a lot of responsibility, because they can sway and change the course of a book's trajectory depending on what they say about it. But it's the same with popular books as well, because a popular book doesn't mean it's necessarily good, however you define good as an individual, or that you're going to like the book. Think of some of the best-selling books in any genre the last 20 years, and you might pick one of them up and read it and just go, I can see what it's about, I understand the story and the characters and the world building and the rest of it, but I just didn't like it. And it doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean that everyone else is wrong either, because we're all individuals. It's just that a large number of people have read this book. Are all of the reviews positive? Probably not. There will be people saying, I didn't enjoy it and these are the reasons why. A quick word on content. Now, not every book has to challenge the status quo. Not every book has to be deep and meaningful and just kind of challenge everything that you have in your mind. Some books are just fun. They're light, they're cozy, they're entertaining, they're humorous, they're an action thriller, and everything that happens on the surface is all that the book is about, and that's perfectly fine. There's no reason that every book has to be one of those difficult books that challenges you, that requires critical thinking, nor do you have to constantly read those kind of books. And I hate when people say, oh, what's your guilty pleasure in terms of reading a book? I don't have any guilty pleasures. If I like the book, I like the book. No one should be telling you what is a guilty pleasure. Reading a cozy romance, well, you're just not challenging yourself. You know, they don't know your life. They don't know what's going on in your world. If that's comforting and you enjoy that kind of thing, you shouldn't feel guilty about it. There's a difference between that and reading something, you know, terrible propaganda, but in terms of fiction, something that you enjoy, never let anybody dictate to you what you should and should not be reading, or you should enjoy something or not. Carrying on from social media in general, I want to talk about reviews. Reviews, positive and negative reviews, can have an enormous impact on an author and how the book is perceived, and obviously possibly the trajectory of the book going forward, and the number of reviews, but also what people are saying within those reviews. I'll give you an example. Mike, who does Mike's Books reviews on YouTube, he's a very popular booktuber. About 3 or 4 years ago, I'd say, he became friends with Christopher Rocchio, who writes the Sun Eater series, and he started talking about the books and promoting them in videos. And, you know, they're fantastic books. I've now read the first 2 books in the series. I absolutely love it. It's been compared to Dune, which is one of my favourite science fiction books of all time, which is why I was kind of wary about that. However, having now read the book, I think it is fantastic. I think it will be a series that will be remembered for years to come. So because of the input of Mike and the promotion and his such positivity about the series, the books did get a boost in sales, and their word did do very, very well, and the trajectory started to go up. About 3 months ago, maybe, another popular booktuber who's got a very big channel called Daniel Green, he then discovered the Sun Eater series, and there again the sales took a massive spike even more, and he's interviewed Christopher on his channel like I have, and you know, the series is doing really, really well. However, imagine if the opposite had happened, that, you know, Mike's been promoting the books and the sales are going up and people are becoming more aware of it, and then Daniel comes along and reviews the book and says, yeah, I didn't like it, it's not very good, you know, it's not a great series. Now, I've said that on purpose, you know, not a great series from his point of view. It could have completely derailed any of the growth that the series has had before, and then suddenly it's just people are not interested and they're turning away based upon the opinion of one person, and then suddenly you'd have a whole group of people who might have been considering the series suddenly don't take a look at it at all. And that sets quite a dangerous precedent, I think. Now, I'm not saying booktubers should only be positive about any book that they review, but whenever someone in a position of power, like booktubers and booktokers now with big followings have become, I think it's incumbent on them to explain, if they don't enjoy a series, to say why. Because sometimes a negative review, as I mentioned, can still be positive in some ways. Pick any book you like. Just list, I've read this particular book and my review is a negative one. But I say, it's really, really slow. There's a lot of stuff on character. There's a bit of world building, but it's more about the emotions of the people. There wasn't enough action. There wasn't enough pace. So I'm only going to give it 2 stars. Another person reading that review could come along and say, I love kind of character-driven books. I like the slow burn and the build. I love the kind of romance in the background. I'm not really interested in a lot of action. This is perfect for me. Whereas if I just said, this book is crap, it's the worst thing I've ever read, it's awful, it's appalling, don't read it, that can put a lot of people immediately off a book, and those with big followings could equally change the trajectory of a series and how well it does. So I think booktubers have enormous power, but at the end of the day, an individual booktuber is still one opinion, and you should listen to multiple opinions. But if you're thinking about buying a book or borrowing it from a library and you seek out opinions on it, I would always suggest pick up more than one. Always watch a couple. And even if they're smaller booktubers, their opinion is just as valid as some of the bigger ones, because they could raise any number of different issues that the other person has not. You as an individual, whenever you read a book, will paint it in your mind. You'll create your own perspectives, viewpoints, opinions on the book based upon your own experiences in your life. And every single reader is completely unique and completely different. However, if you have questions about the book, I think sometimes it's dangerous to go and seek out online sources when they're just basing upon theories, feelings, and their own impersonal opinions there again, when the source exists who can give you definitive answers about a book. Now, this isn't where, I'm not talking about where you read a book and you say, oh, I felt this book connected to this experience in my life, it reminded me of this with my father, it reminded me of this when I was a child. Those are unique to you, and no one can tell you that anything that the book has generated, the emotions, are false. They're absolutely your own and they're absolutely valid, and everything that you felt is true. However, if you're trying to understand the meaning of the book, there's the story and then there's what this book is about. As I've already said, not every book has to be about something more than what it is. But if you read a book and it's obscure or there's something going on beneath the surface and you're not quite sure, there's one reliable, trusted source who has all of the answers. And given the advent of social media, given the fact that me as an author is sat here doing this, and a lot of people are on Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and everything else now, go to the trusted source who has the answers, and that's the author. Instead of relying on someone's theory or supposition, go to the source, the creator of this piece of work, and with questions. As I said, a lot of authors are on social media, but also most of them have websites of some kind. And just emailing an author with questions or theories, or every encounter I've had with a fan, every kind of positive experience that I've had, whether it's been through an email or in person at events or, long form discussion on Zoom chats or video interviews and things, they are 1,000 times more rewarding than anybody kind of interaction that I've had with, positive on social media. I can give you my top 10 interactions with fans that I've had in person compared to, I can't think of, the top 10 that I have that people have said nice things on Twitter. They're great and they're brilliant, but they're designed for short form, brief things. Being an author, we work in a bubble all of the time. We don't know what people are going to think about the book until it comes out a year, 2 years after we've released it and it's published in a traditional space. But getting feedback from readers is absolutely fantastic. I've had people email me and say, this book reminded me of this thing from my childhood. It brought back all these fond memories of X, Y, and Z. I really enjoyed the story and all the rest of it, but I loved the book because of how it made me feel based upon my own individual experiences. Now, I couldn't know any of those things. I was writing about a particular thing, but it connected with this one individual on a level that I never anticipated, I can never have predicted. And it's absolutely wonderful. It is some of the best stuff ever. And all authors are like this. We work in a bubble. We don't know what's going on until it's out there. So if you did love a book, obviously post a review. That does help enormously. But reach out to an author. Just ask them. And if you're not sure about something or you want clarification about something, just drop them an email. I want to talk a little bit more about reviews. So what you won't know about me, I am quite a passionate person in my private life. There's a lot of things that are very important to me. Obviously, I'm incredibly passionate about my work, But one of the many reasons I don't read my reviews is that I can't control how people will interpret the work, and you then can't go back on a review. I've done videos saying, previous one, that reviews aren't for authors, and I stand by that. The worst thing I could do as an author would be to read my reviews and then criticize all of the readers on all the things they got wrong about it and say, you don't understand, no, you've interpreted that wrong, this isn't right, you just don't get it. This is just horrific. It's kind of the worst kind of interactions you can have. And there was, I won't name who, but a very popular horror writer did this on a few years ago. Someone had posted some reviews on Amazon, and she started commenting and replying back and saying why they were stupid, why they didn't get it, and why they were wrong. They didn't need to do that, but they felt so attacked and they felt so offended and so upset by it. And it is incredibly frustrating as a writer if I put something in a book and people just don't get it. But I can't control that, and you have to accept it. Reviews are not there for me. They're there for other readers to absorb things about the book and decide, are any of these elements the kind of things that I would like in a story, and therefore do I want to read the book. They're not telling me as the author how to fix my book, because one, it's too late, the book is out, and two, whose opinion am I going to trust? Some rando on the internet, or the people that I work with who work in publishing, beta readers, agents, editors? Those are the people in my life who read the book first. Those are the people that I trust. Going back to what I said, again, if you can't tell the difference between personal taste about a book and an opinion of a book versus what the underlying message is that is written into the code of the book by the author, those are two very, very different things. Saying you didn't like a book for these reasons versus it's not about anything, it's about this, and then someone else saying, actually, that's not true. This is what it's actually about. There again, if you're not sure, go to the source. Always go to the source and ask the author. I think this is why in-person discussions are just so much better, because it avoids the misinterpretation. Like if you do something on social media, you've seen pylons and you've seen people trying to dig themselves out of hole and there's misinterpretation, or someone posts something and gets on a plane and 8 hours later they get off the plane and there's a firestorm and they didn't know what's going on or why, and they've not been able to defend themselves. Whereas if I sit down with someone and there's an immediacy, there's back and forth, which is why I think in-person discussions in any capacity are so much healthier and so much better than just putting a statement out there. I want to talk about messages in books. There's a huge gulf between someone exploring a fundamental idea in their book, whatever it might be, racism, sexism, homophobia, the environment. Indirectly in their work, they're talking about the idea and they're exploring it. They're presenting the idea through the lens of the story and the characters' experiences, and they're showing both sides of it. They're talking about it as a way with their story to explore this particular theme. There's a vast gulf between that and someone preaching and saying, this is the thing, this is how you should live, this is how you should be as an individual, and putting it out essentially as like a propaganda within their work to tell you how to live. If I pick up a book and within the first few pages I realise that you're banging a drum for an agenda, whatever that agenda might be, even if I agree with it, even if it's something that I'm fully on board with, I will just put that book down and move on. I'm not interested in that. We all come to books for different reasons. As we've said, some can be challenging, some don't need to be. But if that's all you're doing, creating a book as a vehicle to ram a message right down the throats of the readers, I think that's horrendous. I think it's disingenuous. I think it's gross, to be honest. There's a vast difference between exploring an idea in a fair and balanced way and just giving a one-sided argument. And this goes back to the title of the video. I think some authors are so afraid of expressing an opinion, whatever it might be, that they dumb their books down. I think they're so paranoid about pylons and social media and activists from whatever group, left or right, coming for them, that they don't put stuff in their book. I think some are so worried about how their work is going to be interpreted by others that they dumb their work down on purpose. But then you get the other side where people believe their work is the vehicle for their right to preach. They think that it's my work, I can do whatever I want, I can say whatever I want, and if you don't like it, you can just go elsewhere. And that's their kind of attitude. And those two extremes I find really kind of disturbing and really worrying, to be honest. There's no kind of middle ground. In some arguments on social media sometimes, someone will say something and I just don't bother responding because I agree with some of what they're saying, but I disagree with what other people are saying. And there isn't that way to have a fair and balanced discussion. Whereas normally in fiction, you have quite a long piece to explore the theme in an interesting way and a thoughtful way. That attitude of the right to preach and sort of saying, you know, if you don't like it, go away, I think it's quite childish, I think it's immature, I think it's closed-minded, and I think it's rather just quite a bit sad, really. I think some authors as well are so afraid of upsetting people that they don't include certain things in their book. But then there's the problems that some people have, such as if you include a certain type of character, be it a sexist, a homophobe, a racist, whatever it might be, they think, and some readers do interpret this, as therefore being the author in favour of that. They can't tell the difference between a character having that belief and the author having that belief. Now, there are some authors who are very public about certain belief systems, and I'm not going to name or get into them, but they think that if you simply include one of these characters, then you are in favour of it, you're promoting it, and that the mere act of talking about it, having a character with this particular view, is a bad thing, and you shouldn't have it in your book at all. Part of the argument is, they sort of say, particularly with fantasy, that if it's a fantasy world, why do you need to have any characters with these kind of things? Why do they have to have racists or sexists or homophobes? Surely if it's a fantasy world and you're the creator and you can make everything in a particular way that you want, why would you bother to include those things? They're just going to upset people. They're just going to make people uncomfortable. Why would you have that in the story? Some readers believe by simply the inclusion of certain difficult characters that you're perpetrating the idea of this and you're keeping it going, and therefore you're obviously in favour of it as the author, which just isn't true at all. The danger is if your characters, and none of them have any kind of difficult, spiky, uncomfortable traits, then everything just becomes the same. It becomes like the goo that they're eating in the Matrix, just this sludge where nothing has any realism. And surely as a writer, that's what you're trying to create. You're trying to create a realistic scenario that people understand and interpret. Conflict comes through differences that people have. And yes, diversity is important in stories representing the world, but therefore it requires representing people that don't share the same ideals, beliefs as you do, and creating a realistic society in any kind of story. You're always going to get people that don't think like you because they aren't you. And to not have any kind of diversity of thought is disingenuous, and your primary job as a writer is to be truthful to the scenario and the situation that you've created. If you as an individual live in this world, as an active part of this world, then every day you're going to come across people that don't share the same beliefs, thoughts, structures as you do. That's just how the world is, because we're all so different, we're all so diverse. It's just a part of daily life that you have to kind of accept, because that's the way we all are, because we're all so different. The alternative to that is to live within a community where everybody thinks the same, everybody is into the same things, and you don't have any diversity of thought and have completely homogenous. But even if you live in such a cut-off society, I suspect even then you're still going to get people that will want to have different thoughts and leave and go off and find out what's beyond the wall that we never talk about, we're not supposed to explore. You could write a utopia where everything's fine, everyone gets along, or some kind of cozy fantasy or cozy story of any kind, and that's fine. Some people love those kind of stories, but that's not what the broad spectrum of fiction is that's out there. Most books have some kind of conflict, and even the kind of cozy fantasy ones that have come along now, there has to be some kind of drama, there has to be something at stake which requires conflict. So this kind of comes to the crux of the video. I think some readers are becoming dumber, and I think some authors are dumbing stuff down out of fear, out of desperation, out of concern. But I think some readers are just not challenging themselves. They're not critically thinking about a book. They're viewing books as just something to skim through and never look beneath the surface of what's actually going on in the text. Some authors do want to preach, and then some readers don't mind that. They like the fact that what the person is saying echoes with what they're saying and what they believe. It creates reassurance for them that this person believes the same thing as you, and they find it comforting in having another voice that says exactly the same kind of things as you were thinking. But the biggest danger is, of course, then it just becomes an echo chamber with people telling you how to live, and you just go along with it because you think this is the right way, and it never challenges anything about your status quo. Some people don't like to have their faith questioned, but I think it's a core principle of how we live as individuals. We're constantly testing and checking things. As a scientist, they base a lot of what they've done on a theory and then constantly test that theory to build on something else. So it's not a case of science versus religion. Scientists are constantly doing that. They're constantly pushing the boundaries and seeing what's out there and can we do the next thing and how does it work, and they're testing it. And I think testing your beliefs, your thoughts, your ideas is important about certain things. Now, this isn't the same as testing the law. That's not sort of saying, yeah, murder, I think that's a good thing. Yes, I've changed my mind on that. We should change the law and get it changed. And therefore, murder should be legal. But think about what is legal in the West and in a lot of countries that is illegal in some parts of this world still. Being gay is no longer a crime, but you go back 100 years in the West and think about how much fear there was, how much embarrassment, how much shame there was attached to it. But there are certain countries that still exist within this world where if you go and declare that you are gay, you could be imprisoned and you could be put to death. People challenge that belief that was set within society, and the laws changed because we tested it. And obviously, if you can't tell the difference between testing something like that and testing the law to do with murder, then you're probably not watching this video at this point. You've probably checked out and just written, readers aren't dumb, and moved on. I think reassessing who we are, challenging your mindset, makes us better people. Be it religious or a general worldview, I think the best science fiction and fantasy does this subtly, does this with care, and does this by exploring an idea. It doesn't present it as saying, this is the only way to be, this is the right way, this is how you should think. The best stuff presents it in an interesting and thought-provoking way without it just being preachy or telling you how to be. Never exposing yourself to anything different, anything that challenges you, I think is dangerous. I think it breeds complacency. I think it's arrogant. I think it breeds fear and paranoia, and it makes people afraid, and also makes people quite brittle as well. That's when someone pokes something and then you go away and you're scared about it. Whereas if you've queried it internally and thought about it and discussed it with other people and come to a conclusion over time rather than just following what you're told, I think that's much more powerful, and it creates, these kind of discussions create interesting thoughts, ideas, debate, which generates stuff from the imagination, which pushes us forward in lots of different ways, which changes society, as I've talked about, and can change the law. I think it builds character. I think it creates interesting people, scientists, artists, painters, people that want to change the world in some way, in some small capacity. So I think critical thinking is really important to that, and I think reading fiction plays a role in that. It's a very dense topic to talk about. Never listen to anything outside your echo chamber of whatever people says, I think is the kind of infantilization of adults. If you're a parent, you protect your child from the worst things out there until they're old enough to understand it and comprehend it in a way. It's not just a case of, I'm not showing you this horror film because it will scare you. It's a case of understanding, why is it terrifying? What is it actually about? What were they trying to do? Was it just a gore fest, or was it actually talking about something else? And the child won't be able to have that kind of discussion at a certain age because their brain isn't developed enough to reach that. So you shield them from those things until they're old enough and they've developed enough that you can then have that conversation with them and say, why did it make you feel uncomfortable? But doing that to adults, I think is really scary and really terrifying, and I think it's really quite ridiculous to do that. As I said, you move through life, you'll come across people that don't agree with you, so never reading anything that challenges you, upsets you, bothers you, or you just skim every single book on the surface, I think is quite worrying, really. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, not every book has to do that. Not every book has to change the status quo, make you question your thinking about everything. But in most science fiction and fantasy books, they're usually talking about something else. We get away with it a lot more than other genres because we're doing it through a lens that's just slightly askew. The worst science fiction fantasy books, bang the drum, page one, you know what they're there to do. They're on their soapbox and they're going to tell you something. I put them down and I move on. I'm not interested in those kind of books as a reader. I have no idea if this video is going to make sense, but it's going to be fun editing it. So, in conclusion, are some readers stupid, more stupid than they were before? Yes, I think they are, and some are not. I think some rely on other people to tell them how to think, tell them what the book is about, tell them how to interpret it, and they never think about it for themselves. I think social media can be quite damaging. It can have great positive effects, as I've said. It can change the trajectory and the career of some individuals, but it can also completely tank them. I think it's a great way for readers to engage directly with authors, but nothing beats the face-to-face. And if you're not sure about something and you have theories and questions, Go to the source and they can tell you if they were right, rather than relying on an individual. Even if you think they're a trusted source, they are still interpreting it through their own lens. They are not the source. I think some authors are afraid. I think some authors are dumbing things down because they're scared. And some books now have trigger warnings, which I think is, I don't like that at all. I think content warnings is more appropriate. And if you can't tell the difference between the two, it is very important. The semantics of the difference is very, very important. I think genres in some ways are choking us. I think the kind of more definitions and more terms that we apply create smaller and smaller boxes, particularly in fantasy. And I know I had a discussion with Christopher Rocchio and he's talked about it a lot in interviews, and I share his belief in that. I think it can be quite damaging. So it's not a simple yes-no answer. It's not, too long didn't read, the answer is yes, readers are becoming stupid, or no, they are not becoming more stupid. I think it's a really complicated debate, and I want to hear your thoughts and opinions, and let me know how you feel as a reader and as an author. I think it's something that's going to go on for a while. So what do you think? Oh God, I've got to go and edit this now. Yeah, I've gone on way too long. So that's what I'm going to talk about for today, but I'll be back soon with another video.